Welcome back to my animal education series. Today I'm going to be talking about some hippos, and it was way too hot for me to film outside. I found a new filming spot, and it's out there in the sun, and then Florida wanted to be about 90 plus degrees today, so I did not want to do that. But instead I'm going to film here in front of this fish tank. We're talking about semi-aquatic animals, so a fish tank was the best I can do inside. I haven't talked about this setup on the channel at all, but you have seen the tank before. This used to be my 50% land, 50% water setup. I will do a little update on this tank at some point. I have some animal room updates I want to do. So once I do those, I'll probably update you guys on this tank and why it's no longer 50% land and water and how I decided to completely change it up. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about hippos. And a lot of you guys know that hippos are found in Central and Southern Africa, but what you may not know is that there's actually a population of hippos in South America. And how these hippos got there is actually quite interesting. And once I found out that information, we made this whole video as an excuse to tell you guys that story, because I just think it's really interesting and quite bizarre. But as you know, hippos are the third largest land mammal species on the planet, other than elephants and rhinos, and these animals live a semi-aquatic lifestyle. Hippopotamus comes from the Greek words meaning water horse, even though these animals don't exactly look like modern horses. Hippos will spend a lot of their days near rivers, lakes, and swampy areas as they spend most of their day in the water. They will come up during the nighttime once it cools off a little bit and graze. When they're in the water, they'll typically be in a group of hippos, but once they go out and graze, they will probably be on their own. And even though hippos spend a lot of their days in the water, they're not usually the best swimmers. Typically they'll either be resting under the water or galloping under the water, probably where the term horse came from in that name. But when they're underwater, they spend a lot of time out of the direct sun, and a lot of their nostrils, their eyes, and their ears are all on the top of their head, so they can stick up the very minimum part of their body up and above the water. Our hippo friends have some interesting adaptations that some of us may have wished they had. Hippos secrete a natural sunscreen, and this secretion is colorless, but it very quickly turns blood colored, which leads to a lot of people mistaking it for hippos being covered in blood. Even with this natural sunscreen though, they are very susceptible to sunburns and skin cracking if they're out in the sun for too long, which may be some of the reasons why they're in the water or in the mud so often. Obviously, hippos are really large animals, and they live near large predators such as lions, crocodiles, and hyenas. Typically, these animals will not go after an adult hippo because the whole hippo is way bigger and stronger than they are, but it has occurred whether the animal is really old or sick or can't really fight for itself. That stuff does happen. It just happens in nature. But these animals will go after younger hippos, which definitely can't defend themselves as well as a much larger hippo. And hippos have killed and attacked crocodiles that are near them, but it's typically only if the crocodile is getting too close to their herd, or when the rivers and the lakes are drying up and there's a lot less water for them to share, and forcing these animals closer to each other. These hippos can live a pretty long time, and out in the wild they can live between 40 and 50 years. Now, there was an older resident at the Mesker Park Zoo. Her name was Donna, and she was a hippo who died at the age of 61 years. And on my quick Google search, there was a hippo that was 65 who was captive in the Philippines, which goes to show that these animals can get up there in age. And if the Mesker Park Zoo does sound familiar to you guys, I have filmed several videos at the Mesker Park Zoo. So if you guys are ever near Evansville, Indiana, make sure you check out that zoo. But without any further ado, let's talk about South American hippos and their amazing story. In the 1980s, Pablo Escobar, a drug kingpin, you may have heard of him before, but he bought and kept 4 hippos at his private zoo in Colombia. Escobar was later killed by Colombian authorities, and during a raid of his compound, they confiscated a lot of the animals that he had there. But the local authorities were not prepared to capture and take with them 4 large hippos. So they just left them there to roam free until they came back for them later. The pod of hippos grew, and they eventually escaped the compound and made their way to the nearest river and began to live wild. As the pod of hippo begins to grow, these hippos became newsworthy, as you can see by these examples. These hippos attracted the attention of news outlets from around the world about Escobar's wild hippos. These hippos were left to fend for themselves for over a decade, and in 2009 the Colombian authorities started to think what they should do about the wild hippo population. Some ecologists said that they should be left alone, and these hippos are filling a missing void that was left in the natural environment. This group of hippos is now reaching close to 100 animals. I'm going to have a small apology here because while I was filming this, my neighbors decided to mow their lawn, and I'm kind of in the flow, and I don't want to lose my flow right now, so I'm going to keep filming. I just do apologize for any background noise, and I will try to talk louder when they get closer to my side of the house. Anyway, scientists and conservationists are keeping a close eye on the hippo populations in South America to see what they are doing to the natural Colombian environment. Hippos back in Africa affect their environment a lot by redirecting water flow and adding a bunch of extra nutrients to the water use, like through their waste. Sorry, got something in my throat. But they add a bunch of extra nutrients through their waste. So they're keeping a close eye on what the hippos are doing to the Colombian environment in South America. Some argue that these hippos are actually replacing the void left by a previously extinct larger herbivore for about 20,000 years ago. Though there are tapirs in South America, but a lot of tapir species are not doing so well, and they're on the decline. Now, I thought that the South American hippo story was pretty interesting, but it gets even better. When I was doing my research, I found out about something called the American Hippo Bill. If you are like me, you probably have never heard of the American Hippo Bill. And back in 1910, U.S. Representative Robert Broussard of Louisiana introduced the American Hippo Bill into Congress, where we would import and release hippos into the Louisiana bayou, and he believed that these hippos would eat a lot of the water hyacinth plant that was invasive and clogging up a lot of the bayous and the rivers at the time. And that if people were to hunt hippos, the hippo meat would help with the meat crisis that was going on at the time. President Theodore Roosevelt backed this plan, and he thought it was a great idea, as did the Department of Agriculture. This plan obviously never went through, and there are no hippos, as far as I know, released into the Louisiana bayou. But it blows my mind that it could have made a drastic impact to the Louisiana bayou and just the southern part of the United States alone, and it definitely would have added a very interesting twist to the U.S. History Channel's Swamp People. Anyway, that's a bunch of the interesting information I found on hippos that I thought I'd share with you guys and then give you guys a little bit of information on hippos themselves. So if you guys enjoyed this week's episode, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and as always, I will see you next week.